session that will add a lot of value, especially to anyone who is in the corporate space or anyone who finds themselves in the business space. It's quite important, especially in the age that we found ourselves, in the age of artificial intelligence, how as individuals we have to begin to think, about making more strategic decisions in our time. Data is the new gold for any business that wants to see the future and live in that future. And so our approach towards data and our approach towards understanding how business should begin to run in this new age is very important, and it's something we cannot take for granted. So once again, I welcome everyone on board, and I would just like to share my screen in a moment before we get things started. Okay, all right. Okay, perfect. So hopefully my screen is visible. Yes, I think so. Okay, yes. So once again, you're welcome to this session, and this is from Estrada International Staffing Solutions. My name is Kenny Omiyale, and I lead the training and development arm of Estrada. All right. Because of the want of time, and there's a lot of things we have to talk about, we will just dive straight into the point of discussion that we have. So when we're talking about why business strategies fail, it's not that it is not a foolproof approach, and this is not also cast in stones. One of the core things we need to understand about this is that every business, the goal of every business is to thrive. The goal of every business is to scale. The goal of every business is to expand and to become even much better off. But sadly, not every business will get to see that reality. And so the purpose of this session is to at least arm businesses. Businesses is either you're an entrepreneur or you find yourself in the corporate space with the approach or some of the things you can do to ensure that you are able to still manage the profitability, the scalability of your business, especially when it comes to decision making. And one of the core things that we just want to quickly jump in is that the world that we find ourselves today, artificial intelligence is either your ally or your competitor. And the worst space we can ever be is for AI to be your competitor. The goal for you is to find out how can you leverage on artificial intelligence in such a way that AI works for the advantage of your business. But sadly, there are a lot of businesses today that are competing with artificial intelligence. What that means is that in the next months, in the next years, in the next couple of weeks, when artificial intelligence goes fledged on into their industry, there's really nothing much for their businesses to ride on. Okay, so one of the things we want to look at today is why do certain business strategies fail, even after you've done all the retreats, you've done all the research. But what are some of the things that still make sure that no matter how well you have planned, some of those things still do not go as planned? Okay, essentially, everyone who is here, one of the core things you should have at the back of your mind that you're going to get as a result of this is that you learn to uncover what the top reasons why businesses fail and to ensure that your business is not a part of that. Okay, you'd also get to learn how to use data-driven insights, in order to identify some of the things that can cause business failure, either as an entrepreneur or you find yourself in the corporate space. Would also give you tools that you can use to align strategy with execution and then enable you to drive more meaningful and measurable results. Like has been mentioned before, the people that this session is very apt for are business leaders and executives, strategy and operations managers, people that are into data, like analysts, people that seek to optimize performances, and also obviously entrepreneurs. We can never take entrepreneurs away. And so at the end of this session, you will get to learn how to turn theoretical plans into real world success. There are a lot of businesses that only succeed on paper, but when we bring them to the real space, the business space, they fall flat. And so it's very important that we need to begin to see beyond business plans on papers to how can we essentially make our businesses succeed. All right. And this webinar is going to equip you with some of the frameworks and how to really diagnose strategic breakdowns. Okay. So it's really going to be an exciting time. And I do believe that we're going to get a lot of value from that. The first thing I want us to touch is we've all heard about the concept of the iceberg. Now, what that means is that the weightier part of an iceberg is not at the surface. If you think icebergs are big, wait until you see what is under the surface. And there are many businesses that focus so much on what is on the surface without putting more intention and attention to what is actually underneath. Okay. And so many business people, they are too focused with what is just on the surface. The engine that powers that business is actually what is below the surface. And so just as an introduction, we're going to look into the prognosis of that iceberg as how it regards to our business. So we'll be looking at what the top of the iceberg is. Now, it's important to note that the things on the top of the iceberg are also important, but they are not as important as the things at the bottom of the iceberg. What that means is that if you are spending 50% of your resources, time, on what is at the top of the iceberg, you're already making wrong decisions for your business. Because the bottom of the iceberg is actually more weightier. It's actually the foundation that holds the iceberg. It's important that businesses begin to learn how to focus more of their time, more of their strategies, more of their resources on what is actually at the bottom of the iceberg. Now, what are some of the things that we'll find at the top of the iceberg? So, for example, things that do with the brand images, your reputation, commitment into marketing and advertisements, your product and service, customer service and experience, basic indicators of how much, whether you're making profit or not, focusing on like your website, your logo, your design, social media presence. A lot of people will be surprised that how is social media presence the top of the iceberg? Now, like I've mentioned, it doesn't mean that social media presence is not important. If you don't work on your social media presence, you will lose a lot of things. But what I'm trying to make you to understand is that there are lots more things that are core important, and determine the sustainability and even the future of your business. So what are some of those things? Now, it means that these are some of the areas that you need to begin to focus more strategy, decision-making, time, energy, sweat, and blood into so that you get a picture of it. So let's go to the bottom of the pyramid. Now, what are some of the things we need to have in mind? So for example, organizational culture is key. The reason why people will continue to work with you is a result of your culture. If you have a poor culture, even though you have a great product, you're going to have a high attrition rate. And high attrition rate communicates to the public that there's something toxic about your work culture and environment. So that means that any investment that is put into galvanizing the organizational culture is a good investment. Something as simple as your core values and missions are also very important. And the thing about the core values is that there is a core value that is written on paper and stuck on the wall in the office. But there is actually a core value that is the hidden thing that drives the business. And one of the ways to know what your core values are, you're not the one to determine really the practicality of your core values. It's the client, it's the customers, it's the external guys, it's the people in public that actually get to determine what your core value is. And so a lot of investment needs to be made to show that you have core values and to ensure that you build systems around those core values. Your internal processes and systems are also very important. So there are things you should spend money on. Your employee morale and engagement. There's nothing wrong in having the best talents in your organization. But if your best talents are not motivated, it's bad for business. Okay, so it's very important. The kind of leadership and management style that you have can also determine whether your business sees the light of day or dives into oblivion. Things like talent development and retention, supply chain logistics, all the things you can see on your screen right now. There is no investment that you make in these things that is bad for your business, because these are the deep-seated things that actually determine whether your business gets to last for the long term or not. So why do business strategies fail? Essentially, there are certain factors or combination of factors that result in business strategies failing. For example, if the goals are not clear, how do you know goals are not clear? If you can randomly pick 3 to 5 people within your organization and ask them what is the goal or the vision of this organization, if these random people cannot agree or say the same thing, then you know that you have unclear goals within the organization. It probably means that those goals have not been communicated enough, or there are no systems that you have created to support those goals. Execution is also the name of the game. So you can have good plans on paper, but if you don't know how to execute, then things will not turn out well. We also have the lack of alignment between strategy and operations. One of the big things that a lot of organizations today fall into because of the economic factors is insufficient resources. And so instead of organizations to begin to move along the path of value-based business systems, they begin to go in the line of cost optimization and reduction. Now, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with cost optimization and reduction. However, it means that it becomes difficult to be innovative in that environment because you're actually in a survival state, and that is not really good for business for the long term. If communication is not exact, that also can affect the excellence rate, of the success of whatever business strategies that you have. Harvard Business Review actually says that 67% of businesses actually fail due to poor execution, not bad plan. A lot of businesses have good business plans, good plans on paper, but when it comes to the execution of those plans, that is where more than 2/3 of organizations actually fail. Now, how can we ensure that this gets better? I'm glad you asked. There are certain things called gaps. Gaps are actually the things that let you know whether an organization or a strategy is going to succeed or not. It's simple. They are called gaps. Now, what are gaps? In a simple way, gaps are the discrepancies between what your current reality is and then what the expected state or the expected reality is. For example, gaps can exist. We have performance gaps, we have skill gaps, we have knowledge gaps, we even have organizational structure gaps. Now, it's just like you're supposed to have a straight line. But if there's something that breaks those lines, they are called gaps. It prevents an organization from being coherent. It prevents organizations from liaising well, and it wastes a lot of time, effort, and resources. So this is why gaps are very important things as an organization that you need to look out for. And if you ask a lot of businesses today, we are almost in the 7th to 8th month of the year. How many of these businesses have studied the gaps that have been perceived within those organizations in the first half of the year? Rarely would you see a lot of organizations doing that. Now, this is the reason why this session is going to help us to understand how to actually approach these things. For example, it's also important to note that there are no perfect organizations. Every organization is struggling with one gap or the other. But the better organizations are the organizations that continue to reduce or shrink the space of the gaps within those organizations. And so every organization owes it within themselves to identify what the gaps are and then close it. Okay, so gaps that are unattended to on the long run will cost you profit, will cost you performance, will even cost you customers, and eventually that will cost you your business growth. And so gaps are kind of like viruses. If you don't attack them early on and you allow them to fester, you're not going to like the result of it. Okay, so for you, it is something you need to know. If something is going wrong within your organization, the first pointer to those things are actually gaps. Okay, now I have a question for us, and I just want to have our thoughts and our insights on this matter. I want you to look at Nigeria as an example. I believe that a larger percentage of people in this webinar are Nigerians. And I want you to look at the political space, the economic space, and the business space. What would you say are some of the gaps that you can see from those spaces? So you can probably just use the comment section, and whatever is the first thing. So by gaps, you're thinking, what are the problems with Nigeria? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? You know, when you think of Nigeria, and when you think of what is preventing it from being the country we all know Nigeria has the potential to be, you know, and the country that Nigeria currently is. You know, so I'll just want to check what people are writing in the comment section, just what they are, just off of your head. What do you think is the problem? What do you think are the challenges? What is preventing Nigeria from being that beloved nation, you know, that everyone can actually be very proud of? I'll wait for a few moments, and then I would like to know what our thoughts, our insights are in this matter. So if you ask any Nigerian what's the number one problem of Nigeria is, okay, someone says infrastructure, lack of faith in the leadership of the country, political leadership, consistent failures of past leaders. Now, one of the things we get to understand is all of these things are true. They are facts. They are things that we can see is preventing the country from becoming who or what we know Nigeria is supposed to become. If you throw that question out there, you would see a lot of responses in this kind of area. So people will mention leadership, people will mention corruption, poverty, healthcare issues, religious and cultural issues, tribalism. Someone already mentioned infrastructure, unemployment, inequality, and etc. Now, it's important for you to note that the first thing that comes to mind is the gap that is closest to your experience. So if you have experienced police brutality and you have that experience, one of the first things that will come to your mind, the reason why Nigeria is bad is there's corruption, there's no respect for law and order, the citizens are not well taken care of. These are the things that come to mind. And these are right. All of these things are gaps. Now, the reason why it appears that Nigeria is a top ship to sail is because it has so many gaps. So when new political figures come in every 4 years and they give us certain promises, the promises are supposedly to help solve our problems. But one of the things that would have even ensured that we are going forward as a nation is to ask people who are responsible for the leadership of this country, what's the gap analysis? How do we move from where we are to where we should be? It's not just about telling us what should be. What system do we have on ground to ensure that everything that has been said, we actually get to that point? And that is where the gap analysis comes in. So the moment you are able to notice a gap, now, we've used Nigeria as an example. Organizations have gaps. Individuals have gaps. Relationships have gaps. And so you can actually use gap analysis in almost anywhere. And so the goal of gap analysis is to allow you to access the difference between an organization's current state and then its desired future state. Okay, it also helps you to identify the areas where performance and capabilities are lacking. And you know that one of the things that drive an organization is the people within the organization, and this is where capacities and performance actually come in. So it's a way to determine what actually needs to be done in order to move the organization forward. Every time you hear we need to move forward, forward actually means metaphorically where we are supposed to be. And so gap analysis is the connection that connects where we currently are, where we should be, and if you check to the right, that area in red or pink, it says action plan and roadmap. That is actually the intentional step that needs to be taken in order to move from the current state then to the desired state. Now, let's begin to break gap analysis down, and then we'll begin to see how it connects with us as individuals and how it connects to the overall, the business. Like I've mentioned earlier, the first thing is to define the gaps. Then we need to analyze that gap, and then we need to bridge it. By bridging it means that you bring the desired state closer to the current state. Every time that happens, it reduces the gap within the organization. Now, defining the gap is the first step. And in a way, it can be the easiest step. As you go forward, it looks like it becomes more complex. However, once you begin to start to define what these gaps are, it actually becomes a lot easier as you go forward. So for example, when it comes to defining the gaps, what are some of the things you need to have at the back of your mind? You have to think about matters of identification. What are the metrics that will be able to quantify this gap? And then there must be stakeholder alignment. We're going to talk in depth about what these things mean. When we go to analyzing the gap, we have to think in terms of what is the root cause analysis. You can do a SWOT analysis, and you can also do process mapping. We'll also look into that shortly. And when it comes to bridging the gap, some of the things to think about are training and upskilling. That might be a solution. Process optimization can also be a solution. Integration of technology like artificial intelligence can also be a solution. And then change management can also be a solution. Okay, so having gotten an understanding of this, let us then break them down one by one so that we understand the concept behind this. So starting with defining the gap, we've emphasized that the first thing to have is what is the current state of the company and what is the desired state of the company. You know, certain organizations can say, we want to be the #1 company in Nigeria that does so and so. Now, that is the desired state. Now, it is not just that. You must have an accurate picture of the qualities and the components of a #1 company in Nigeria, in Africa, in the world, as the case may be. The issue is that a lot of people say that, but they don't really have an idea of what a #1 company looks like. There are certain things that are a taboo for a company or an organization that calls itself the #1. There are certain levels of indiscipline that should not be condoned. There's a certain way they exude confidence, their approach to business, integrity, excellence, and all of these things. And so you must clearly articulate where the organization is today with data to back it up, and then where you want to be. Now, where you want to be is where you need the prognosis. So like I've mentioned earlier, this is where you must be very clear on paper. What does it look like? What does the #1 company look like? And what do you look like? That lets you know what the gap is. And if you want to be truthful to yourself, it's like a race. When you are running a race and you are not the first position, it obviously means that there's someone in front of you. So that lets you know that there may be certain organizations that are actually ahead of you. So you begin to learn what they are doing differently, what is driving them, and then you can use that as good fuel, to fuel your organization when it comes to strategy and making decisions. So the first thing about defining the gap is you must know where you are and you must know where you want to be. It's just like you're taking a Google map. The first two important questions Google Map will ask you is, where's your current location and where do you want to go? The moment you are able to answer those questions, it does is abracadabra and then connects the route that takes you there. That is basically what gap analysis does for you. It allows you to know that, okay, this might not be a straight path. You might have to take certain turns along the way in order to get to your desired place. So imagine you currently have average people working within the organization. And you know that to be the number one organization, you have to work with the excellent guys, the outliers, the people who are setting the pace. But you also have to look at your condition, your current state. Do you have what it takes to pay those excellent players? So that lets you understand why you're probably in the condition you are. What are the kind of clients you face? What is your pricing margin like? All of these things gives you an idea of what your current state is. And then you look at the big shots out there, what they are doing, what's the quality of their clients, what's their price margin, what are the locations. You probably want to be the number one company in something, and you have your headquarters somewhere in maybe Lokoja, for example. You know that Lokoja is not an economic capital in Nigeria. So you have to begin to think, where is that place that gives me access to opportunities, clients, and the money? So you might think, okay, should I go to Lagos? Should I go to Abuja? Should I go to the East? That's what begins to preempt your position based off of defining what those gaps are. The second thing is you have to have quantifiable metrics. Now, when you know what the desired states look like, you have to know what are the KPIs. How do people at that level, how do they perform? What's the industry benchmark? What is the standard? That allows you to measure the gap by things that are quantifiable. So how much money do I need to make? What is the volume of the staff I must have? Month in, month out, what should be the KPI? What is the excellent level, customer service level, client satisfaction rating? All of these things will come under the quantifiable metrics, okay? You must be able to answer the question, what it means to succeed on the job. What is the standard and what are the expectations, even for performance, operation, as the case may be. And then you must have stakeholder alignment. What this means is that ensure that the leaders within your organization agree to what constitutes a gap. So who are the decision makers? And is there a joint idea as to what success means for the organization? As this is a very important part, because if you don't have decision makers aligning, it means that the vision within your organization is not even aligned in the first place. Okay, so these are some of the things you need to have in mind in order to find out what is the gap. Once you have been able to define the gap and find out what those gaps are, then you can move to the next phase. Now, defining the gap just gives you a lot of data and facts, but you need to learn to work on those data and facts in order to get to the next stage. And that is where analyzing the gap comes in, okay? So like we mentioned, in the analyzing of the gap, we're looking at root cause analysis. We're looking at SWOT analysis. We're looking at process mapping. So for example, Pierce Waterhouse Cooper, PwC, they have a 5 why technique, which is one of the things they use in root cause analysis, meaning that you ask why questions not less than 5 times. Why is your organization doing this way? Maybe the answer is because of the location. Why is the location a concern? Because we don't have the finances to get the creme de la creme or to be in a place like Lagos, Abuja. Okay. Why don't you have the finances to find yourself in places like Lagos or Abuja? Or maybe we are not able to hit the kind of revenue that allows us to have that kind of finance. Okay, why are you not able to hit that kind of revenue? So you can see how it's going. You keep borrowing down until you get to a point where there are no further answers. When you get to that point, you can now travel your way back to understand what really this gap is. So the goal of this is to drill down the fundamental cause of what underperformance means for your organization. And the moment you get to that point, it's like a screen gets clear. You see things clearly, almost in a way you have never put attention to before. So that is very important. And the other thing is to be practical and to be realistic. One of the things that allows you to be practical and realistic is SWOT analysis. It lets you know what level you are and what you can actually play with. Okay, so SWOT analysis, you can use it to access your internal factors and then external factors. That's what SWOT analysis is. So your strengths, your weaknesses, which are for the internal, then opportunities and threats, which are for the external factors. Okay, now what this does to you is it allows you to thoroughly discover the areas of your strength, the areas of your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats, and all of this actually point you to the gaps that are created by them. So your strengths, you benchmark it with the industry strength, you find the gap. Your weakness, you benchmark it with competitors, you find the gap. Opportunities, gap. Threats, gap. Okay, that is how to begin to find and analyze what these gaps are. Then the final part of the process is process mapping. Now, process mapping helps you to identify the bottlenecks within workflow. So there are many people who do certain things but don't even have a process to it. What that means is that anybody that takes on that role just does things by default. There is no standardization. And you cannot be competent without standardization. Standardization allows you to find the best approach towards something and then institutionalize that best approach. So maybe the way you're speaking to customers is the reason why they're not coming back. Can you find out how the top brands speak to customers? And then can you imitate that? And see if there's going to be a difference. So from the very moment you say, hello, you're welcome to Estrada International Staffing Solutions, how may I be of service to you? And then you're able to listen. The environment is there. All of these things are processes. How long does it take you to pick up the phone? How clear is your voice? What's the background like? All of these things gives you an approach of the feelings and the bottlenecks, that might come that affect the quality of work that you do. Whether it's bureaucracy, whether it takes a lot of time to get approval, maybe the team's collaboration is not as fluid as it should be. When someone has done their work, for the other team to respond, it takes a lot of time. Some people don't check their mails as often as possible. There are no automation processes in place. All of these things are what you use to analyze the gaps within the organization. Now, analyzing the gaps of the organization, you have to be objective. You have to be truthful to yourself. Once you find out what the problems are, own it, and then begin to see what is the way forward and what can we do to make things different. Okay, it's not really that difficult. Then the final stage is bridging the gap. Now, once you identify the gap, once you've been able to analyze the gap, it lets you know what the next step solution should be. So maybe someone doesn't talk well on the phone, or they don't say the right things. Maybe they just need to be trained in customer service or how to speak. Or maybe they need to be trained in grooming or attend a grooming class to know how to comport themselves. Or maybe it's a leadership level and they need executive presence. How do you close deals? Okay, so these are some of the things that analysis of gaps afford you to know. And then you can now begin to use training and upskilling, to shorten the gaps. So for example, with emphasis on time, priority, cost, return on investment, you now begin to start from the most important skills that you need, because we all don't have infinite money. And so based off of the resources that we have, what is the most important thing that we need to get trained on to improve, or at least to close that gap even a lot more? So we are looking in the area of maybe competence, growth, revenue, stability. What is important to you? For an organization, what is most important to them might be competence. They just want the best guys in the market. For another organization, it is revenue. We want to make more money. For an organization, it's growth. We want to scale. We want to be in 2 different locations. Now, based off of what is important for that organization, it lets you know what is a priority to them. Okay, so that is where training and upskilling actually can help. The other one is process optimization. So after you've done your process mapping, it then allows you to find a way to optimize. So you either implement a lean methodology, or you implement an agile methodology based off of your goal and then what you have the capacity for. So an organization that is probably struggling with revenue or finances, they might want to go lean. Instead of bringing too many people into the department, they just hire somebody that is able to do a lot of those things, okay? So your strategic approach is actually going to be based on how much of yourself you understand and how realistic you are, with what you need to do. So you need to thoroughly discover your areas of strength, weaknesses. Like SWOT analysis allows you to find that. And then you're able to find out what the gaps have been created, and then you work on that, okay? Technology integration is where you automate repetitive tasks in order to be more efficient. This is one of the places AI is coming in. So for example, whenever you hear someone like Amazon, you hear Amazon is bringing robots and artificial intelligence, they didn't just think about it. They didn't just say, oh, because we have a lot of money, let's bring in the robots. No, they actually had to do analysis. What would be the best thing? Okay, we want to make more money, want to become more efficient. What should we do? Now, when they go through the analysis, then they probably came up with, okay, we have too many people, because too many people means we are spending so much on salaries. Okay, on the long term, you keep paying people salaries for as long as they live. But what if you get a robot that you just have to buy once, and then you continue to service? Not the first time you buy a robot, it might seem expensive. But when you think of the long-term implication, they can say, oh, okay, this saves us a lot more money on the long term. Okay, artificial intelligence, now you probably don't need as much HR people as you thought you did, because one artificial intelligence agent is able to help you with screening interviews, is able to help you with asking questions, asking the right questions, is able to do a lot of psychoanalysis, and then give you recommendations of the people it believes fit those roles. So instead of getting an HR manager, assistant HR officer, and all of those things, a single system is able to help you to optimize that process. Okay, so that is one of the ROIs that you actually get from leveraging on gap analysis. Then obviously change management is important, because when there's something new coming, you must invest in change management. People don't just accept change easily. You are a living example. When things want to change around you, you first resist it, because humans are traditional by nature. This is how we've been doing things. And so you don't want anything to just disturb or distract your process, and your approach that you've been using towards doing something from the get-go. Okay. So when you're looking at optimizing your performance, PwC actually came out with a brilliant framework, which is quite simple. And I believe it's something a lot of organizations can actually leverage upon. One of the things I would also say at this point is that we'll make these slides available to everyone, just so that you can always have something to refer to much later. So the first phase of a performance optimization strategy is you diagnose. So you conduct a performance health check through the length and breadth of the organization. And then you use data analytics to identify what the trends are. Now, once you identify what the strengths are, then you go into the next phase, which is the design phase. Now, what does it mean to design? It means that once you found out what the gaps are, now you begin to design the solutions that will close that gap. So you either design tailored solution, maybe you create new policies, you bring in new tools, or you have a training. So for example, maybe a company is moving from fully on-site to remote. That is change. So change management needs to be brought into the mix to find out what are the things that will allow us to be efficient even when a lot of people are not in the same space. So you must think about collaborative tools. You must think about communication tools. You must think about monitoring tools. Monitoring in the sense that how do you ensure that people are doing what they say they are doing? How do you monitor people, that people are not watching Netflix during office hours? Okay, so these are some of the things you need to think about. And gap analysis is actually one of the things that allows us to come up with this common solutions. Then you align interventions with business strategy. Remember, everything rises and falls on leadership. So what is the business goal? Every strategy, every idea, every solution you come up with must in a way support the grand organizational goal. Now, when you've been able to design that thing, you move to the next phase, which is you implement. Designing is okay, you have all of these things on paper, you have the prognosis and all of that, but how do you implement? How do you begin to put the pieces together? One of the ways to start it is usually for people that are in product design, there's something called MVP, minimum viable products. So that is the lowest or the minimum product that you need to have to test a tool or to ensure that something is actually going to succeed. So, and these things are run on pilots. So what are the solution pilots in a controlled environment? Just try it before you spend money in making it fully organizational. Try it with a few people. Try it in a team or a department and see how it works. So maybe you want to make the whole company go remote. Okay, maybe you start that remote policy with the business development team, or you try it with the social media and content creation team, and begin to see maybe in the next 4 weeks how effective has working from home been for these guys. Okay, so these are implementation stages, and then you begin to find a way to monitor those things. Okay, maybe they use Slack. Maybe they use all these project management tools, Trello, Monday, Accelo. There are lots of tools that you can actually use to do that. Because when monitoring is key to ensure that what you plan is actually working according to plans. Okay. Now, once you've been able to do that, and you see that, okay, this thing looks like a system that is able to run on its own, then you get to the sustainment phase. That is when you institutionalize it. You have mastered it, you know the pros and cons, and then you are able to allow it to fly on its own. Okay, so you embed these changes into the organizational culture. Okay, and then you continuously measure and refine strategies. Continuous learning never ends, because the more you try, the more you begin to see certain bottlenecks, certain things, and then you go back to the drawing board to create solutions for it. Okay, so it's these things. This can take 3 months. This can take 2 months. For some organizations, it can even take a year. So it depends on the scope of the vision, and how resourceful that organization is. Now, I want us to look at something a bit more practical, because there's one thing to say these things, and there's another thing for these things to actually resonate with us. So I'd like us to look at a case study and the importance of gap analysis in that. So for example, one of the challenges for this case study we're looking at is an organization that is struggling to meet its goals, and it is concerned about the functionality and the productivity of a specific team. Every organization is currently facing this, or has faced this in the past, or may face it in the future, meaning that you have a goal, But you find out that the people working within that organization are not actually delivering on the goals that you have set. What are some of the things you can do, and how do you go about it? So I'm going to give you a simplistic approach to actually navigate this. So the goal is we want to improve the team's performance in order for them to meet their KPIs and then begin to identify the root cause of underperformance. Remember this, you want to improve the team, you must know what you want. A purposeless or someone who lacks vision will just say something like, I want my team to be better. Better is vague. Better can mean anything. That is why you must be able to define the scope from get-go. So what is the goal? You want to improve the team's performance, and how to improve the team's performance, what will measure that performance is when they meet their KPIs. Okay. Now, what is currently preventing them from meeting their KPIs? It is root cause analysis that allows you to find the reason for the underperformance. Okay. So we have a challenge, we have a goal. How do we move from the challenge to the goal? That is the gap analysis. Okay, so follow me as we do this together. So here, you do what is the gap analysis framework. Like I mentioned at the beginning, what is your desired state? You must be able to articulate it. So for this organization, the desired state will be the team consistently meeting or exceeding their KPIs. The team functions at a high level of productivity. That means you don't need to micromanage them, they own the projects and they run with it. The team operates with clarity. Everybody knows their roles and functions. Nobody is swapping. There is good collaboration. They're able to work effectively, and then there's accountability. You can see what everyone is doing, and you know when they are not doing what needs to be done. So that is an accountability structure. Then we have leadership drive, driving performance, motivation, and growth. So the team is performing, the team is motivated, and the team continues to grow. This is our desired state. This is what we want for the organization. Now, we need to know what the current state is. Now, the assessment of the current state may look something like this. KPIs are being missed consistently. The team shows signs of dysfunction. So either there's low morale, low output, there's lack of initiative, poor collaboration, etc. So all of these are signs of a dysfunctional team. The current position could be leadership may be ineffective in driving the necessary results. Or we can also have team members lacking the necessary skills or even understanding of the expectations. So you can send the KPI to them, but have you asked them to interpret this KPI and be assured that they actually understand what they're supposed to do? This is analysis, and this is their first approach to do it. So now we have an idea of the current state. We've been able to articulate what the desired state is. So what's the next thing? The next thing is when a good opportunity to find out what these details is during team meetings. Now, during team meetings is not just when you spit instructions and what you expect people to do. It's actually an avenue to hear from them. What's their challenge? Why are they not having that good attitude towards work anymore? And what are the challenges they're facing? So meetings are a good way, of getting some of these things. Now, the next thing of this framework is you need to identify what the gaps are. Okay. Now, this is a critical decision point because this will determine what approach you give on the long run. So here are two things. Number one, the first option is that there is a leadership competency gap. Maybe the leader within that unit does not have the capacity to lead the group effectively. That is one option. So in this case, it means that the leader may lack the ability to inspire, to motivate, and even hold the team accountable. The leader lacks the ability to communicate the vision and direction of the team or the company, as the case may be. The leader lacks the ability to coach team members towards growth. So these are some of the things that could be a problem with the leadership of that unit. The second thing we might see might not be with the leader. And the indicators for this is low engagement despite training. So if you have trained your people in the unit, but we are still seeing low engagement, there's a high chance that the problem might actually be with the leader. Or lack of clarity of goals, unclear communication, poor conflict management. When people are having tussles, it festers longer than necessary. That's also a sign of poor leadership. Now, another option besides leadership can actually be team competency. So it's either we have leadership competency gap or a team competency gap. Now, when we have a team competency gap, the result could be that the team may not have the skill that is required to perform their roles efficiently. Or the team may not have clear understanding of what their KPIs are. Or the team may not have the exposure or the training that is relevant to the new tools or the new responsibilities. So someone is doing something before, and maybe the person leaves, or the person is on leave or leaves the organization, you ask someone else to fill the space. Are you sure that the person you brought to fill that space has the exposure and the relevant trainings to do well? Now, some of the indicators of team competency gap would be frequent errors. So they keep making the same errors again and again. Delays. Something is supposed to be submitted on Friday. When you ask them on Monday, it still not has been completed. That's delay. Lots of complaints from the clients. Confusion on task execution, even after direction has been given. So if you tell them, okay, so you're supposed to do this, and I'll need to get feedback from you from Friday, and you see that the person is still looking bamboozled, looking confused. They don't understand what they are supposed to do. If you ask them to relay the instruction that has been given to them, they cannot articulate it. That can also be a sign that there's a team competency gap. Now, once you've done this analysis and you've been able to identify these gaps, so it's either there's a leadership competency gap. The indicators you have will let you know whether it's a leadership competency gap or whether it's a team competency gap. Now, when you have found this, what's the next thing to do? Now, the next is now to take action. You already have an idea of what the problem is, then you go to the point of action. Now, how do you take action for this kind of organization, for example? It's quite simple. Number one, if you have found out that the gap is from the leadership position, these are some of the things you need to do to take action. You need to conduct a leadership competency assessment to find out that the person taking the leadership position has the experience, the expertise, the competencies, the skills, and the exposure to manage or lead that team. That's what the leadership competency assessment does for you. You also need to provide coaching, mentoring, or some sort of leadership development training when you have found out that the gap is in leadership. Now, what training does for the leader is to bridge that gap and allow them to become more competent, more confident, and get more results. You don't just leave it at that. You then need to set measurable expectations for the leader's behavior and then the outcomes from the team. So that means at the end of every month, based off of this training, this is what we are looking forward for you to deliver. Okay, and you follow up on that person. Monitoring is very key. So you monitor changes in the team's morale and then the level of productivity post-intervention. This is what happens when you're trying to attack it from the leadership level. Now, once that is done and set in place, you move to the next thing. Now, if you find out that it is a team competency gap, this is what you're going to do. Number one, you perform a skills audit or trainings need analysis. So you know that the first step of both is to find data. So you don't just say, oh, you people are not doing well. I don't know what is wrong with you. Find out what is wrong. And one of the things that allows you to find what is wrong is analysis, assessment. Okay, so perform a team audit or a training needs analysis. Now, once that is done, it allows you to have the specific issues. Then you provide a role-specific upskilling and clarity on the KPI. So this is what is expected of this person. Make the person see sense in what is expected of them, in their deliverables, in their response to time, response to clients, and what have you. Then you restructure the roles of the team, if necessary, based off of strengths and weaknesses. The thing is that a lot of people do not even know the competencies or the SWOT analysis or the personalities of their team. Imagine you putting someone who in his or her personality likes to work alone, and then you give that person a leadership position. It will be difficult for that person to drag the team along because they prefer to work alone. Or maybe you give someone who is highly introverted and does not like to take center stage. Obviously, you know that that team is going to suffer because the personality of the person who has been given leadership position does not fit the expectation that you have. Okay, so you might need to reshuffle the team. You might do MB personality test for them to find out who among these people actually should be in the position of leadership. Who is the best supporter, and then you can now patch them well. And then the final thing for every phase has always been some sort of monitoring and evaluation. So you evaluate the progress with clear before and after metrics. Now, what is the third phase? The third phase is when you notice that the gap is both leadership and team competence. Now, what do you do in that situation? Here are a couple of things you can do. Number one, you always start with leadership development so that the leader is equipped to champion team growth. Okay, so you can inspire them, you can drive them, and what have you. And then you implement a structured learning and development for the team. So you start with the leader, everything rises and falls on leadership. So you start with the development of the leader. You give the leader certain expectation, but so that the leader is not frustrated, you then develop the team that works with that leader. And then by doing that, you align both efforts to continuous performance management and then feedback loops. Now, so for an organization that is trying to meet its KPI and has found it a bit difficult, this is one approach to do this. Now, that being said, you then follow and measure, follow up. So how do you do this? You can set short-term goals, but these short-term goals must be linked to the KPIs, the key results. So for example, can be what would be the percentage improvement in output, error rate reduction, customer satisfaction, process alignment, and even core understanding of the KPIs. So these are some of the things you need to put in place to ensure that you're able to measure and follow up. Then you can have a tracker to track the engagement scores. You need constant feedback. So from time to time, you get feedback from them, either through meetings or giving them like a survey or a questionnaire. And then you have performance dashboards, an organizational place where you can actually see how everyone is performing and check them vis-a-vis one another. And then you come back later to reassess after about maybe 3 to 6 months to measure what the progress indices has been and then what interventions they are. This is how to do it. It's not as difficult, but it takes a lot more intentionality, in order to get the kind of results that we hope for. Now, as we are drawing things to a close, what are some of the things any organization or any leader or any entrepreneur should have in mind in order to get the best out of gap analysis? So number one, the decision you make should be based on data. Don't be quick to make decisions. Have data then make decisions. This is to avoid assumptions, so that you can rely only on metrics. The second thing as a best practice is there must be some sort of cross-functional collaboration. So involve all the relevant departments, to ensure that everything works smoothly and easily. Communication also has to go in for this. We also need to have iterative improvements. So from time to time, check them, find out what can be built upon it, and then keep improving it and keep making it better. The more you do this, you will notice that the shorter the gaps become. And that is always a good news for the organization. And always, leadership is key. If you do not get the support of leadership, nothing is going to fly. You will not get a budget for whatever it is you want to implement, okay? Secure executive support for the sustainability of the team as well. So all of these things are very important. And one of the core things that I want to touch on is with regards to artificial intelligence and how businesses can begin to plan for that phase. Like I mentioned, this slide will be made available to everyone, so that we don't spend too much time on it. Now, what this does for you is there are many organizations who hear that, we are in this age of AI, everything must be AI compliant, but they don't even know if they have the capacity to run and sustain artificial intelligence. So that is what a gap analysis will do for you. So if you're looking at gap analysis to see if your organization can actually begin to automate things using artificial intelligence, these are some of the things you need to do. So in this table, you have the benefits, why it matters, and then what the gap analysis benefit is. It allows you to go through whether you're looking at identifying readiness or aspiration, whether you want to assess the skill gaps in the workplace to find out what can be automated, to find out what technology infrastructures you have and how that is working for you. How can you align that with business processes by bringing artificial intelligence on board, and all of this. So this is quite a mouthful, but as I mentioned, everyone will have access to these slides, and then you can actually look through them, again. The final thing I would want to share with you is we have come up with a gap analysis for artificial intelligence. So if you're a company or an entrepreneur that is beginning to think about innovation and how to bring artificial intelligence into your organization, check first if you have the systems in place. Okay, so we have an AI alignment gap analysis. It's a document that you have to answer certain questions, and then that lets you know how ready it is. So obviously you can't click the screen right now. If you could, you will have been able to download that document. However, for everyone who has been a part of this session, we're going to send the links to you also to download this so that you can begin to see how well artificial intelligence can work with your organization by looking at certain strategic points. So the concrete of everything is that gap analysis is an approach towards finding lasting solutions to an organization. But you also need to understand that the focus of gap analysis should be getting to the other side. What's the other side? The desired state. Okay. Now, if you bend over, that means if you get to a point of over-analyzing, so if you bend over to analyze a gap for too long, you probably fall into it. Okay, so gap analysis is not something that you need to do for a long period of time. Quickly get it done, have all the data, have all the metrics, have all the benchmarks, and put everything in place, and then be ready to fly. Analysis paralysis can set in when you spend too much time, in trying to analyze and start looking to all of the gaps. Now, I know that for some people who probably this is the first time they're experiencing something of this nature, and you probably have more questions way beyond this webinar time we'll be able to take. Here are the details where you can reach out to us. You can check out our website to see the training sessions and the packages that we have and see which your organization might be interested in. but you can also reach out to us via email by going to learning at Estrada International, that's estradaintl.com. You can also reach us on the phone number on your screen. We are passionate about helping a lot of organizations make sense of their goals and their visions. And so if you really do have any questions in that regard, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. However, for the want of time, we might be able to take 1 or 2 questions. If there is anyone who has a question or a comment during this time, you can either unmute yourself, or you can just use the chat section to type in your questions, and we'll try as much as possible to respond to those chats. If there are certain challenges you've been having, maybe as an individual, or something that you've been struggling with, maybe you're in a leadership position within your organization, whether you're even the decision maker, you're the executive, you're the manager, you're the organ at the top of the organization. And what are some of the things you're looking at? How large do you think the gap is for your organization? And then based off of the experience that we've had in doing this for a lot of clients, we might be able to even help you out with certain recommendations that can be of value to you. So if there's anyone that has questions, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to respond to you. The details to reach us are on the screens again, so you can just probably take a screenshot of that, so that even by the time this session ends, you'll be able to reach out to us, and we do the same. Like we also mentioned, we'll be sharing certain documents with everyone who has been a part of this. The goal is to ensure that your approach and your practice of gap analysis becomes a lot easier and less stressful. However, if you've got any challenges along the ways, you can always reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to respond to you. Okay, so here is where we're pulling the stop to this session. However, you can always check back in. The recording of this session will be made available to us. You can also check our YouTube page. We will also upload this session on YouTube. The goal is to ensure that this might fly over the head of a lot of people, but this is to ensure that we can have something to go back to and then remember, as the case may be. If there are any questions, we'll be more than happy to take them. But if we're still pondering on that at this time, you can use the details on the screen to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to do that. One of the final things I want to say before the end of this session is every organization needs gap analysis, but usually a lot of people find out too late when they need gap analysis, and at that point it becomes more expensive and more urgent. It's one of the reasons why I believe that organizations should be quite intentional, with finding out what the current gaps they have are, and make intentional efforts at least to find out how to bridge that gaps. And like I've mentioned before, you can always reach out to us if you would like help with this, or if you're having challenges and you just need a bit of clarity, on how to do this. All right, this has been quite an exciting time for me, and I believe it has been one for you as well. At Estrada, it's important to know that we're not just a learning and development organization. We are a fully human resource organization. So that means everything that has to do with human resource management when it comes to recruitment, outsourcing, having your background checks, career advancement, learning and development, and so much more, even for research and development, and we're able to help you with all of this. So for more information on what we do, you can check out our website at www.estradaintl.com, and you'll be able to see all of our services and all that we do. That's going to be the end from my end. I do believe that we've been able to make the right most of this session, and I look forward to you growing and developing, not just as an individual, but also as an organization. And the next time you hear from me and I hear from you, do have a great week ahead and enjoy the rest of your weekend. From all of Estrada International Staffing Solutions, this is Kenny Omiyale signing out and saying, do have a great day. Thank you all.